A lot happened in week 7, Tyler, and this is a pivotal point of the fantasy year because it kind of represents the midpoint of the regular season. So, obviously, sometimes you got to make changes, and one of the teams that decided it was time to make a change is the team on your jersey over there, my man, the Pittsburgh Steelers. A really questionable decision to a lot of people. Justin Fields was a starter, had this team at 4-2, and it was like, yo, Mike Tomlin, guys, what are you guys doing? Russell Wilson is now the starter for the Steelers and proved why he was named the starters against a very tough Jets team that they dismantled. Russ, man, he looked really good. And I think you can see the elements of this offense that were missing with the downfield passing and just a little bit more versatility with the run game. And, Justin Fields, for everything he was a good fantasy quarterback for us. But I think Russ really unlocked this offense and maybe even some key pieces that we've been expecting to be better, right? George Pickens, seeing him crack his first 100-yard game, man, talk to me.
Yeah, I think the offense, like you said, I mean, it looked good, and you can say the Jets really past 2 weeks. The Jets defense, after they fired Robert Saleh, hasn't looked that great, and they're also kind of banged up, especially on the back end. But it's encouraging for sure because it was also last week too that we saw Najee Harris have a big game. He had another big game, so kind of stacking those games. And the biggest thing, like as a fan, for me personally, and for fantasy as well, is the offense just looked serviceable. Like finally, it looked like they can actually move the ball. The first quarter was abysmal, but you also have to consider like Russ really hasn't played football, like actively started in like over a year nearly. So it's been a long time for him. So getting back into the routine, I thought he looked good. They get the Giants on Monday night, and then they go into the bye. So it's encouraging for all these players. And if you were able to hold on Najee, I'm sure there's people that maybe have dropped him, which I understand. Like he's so bad to start the year, but it's also tough to drop those kind of guys that are seeing the touches. But also Jalen Warren, I will say that too, because he adds an element to this offense as well. Maybe he's not going to be the player that I thought he could have been, but I think he'll have some value, especially as the season progresses. So Pat Fryermuth as well. It's encouraging going forward for sure.
I definitely think it's encouraging going forward. And, I think for guys that, like you talked about, a Najee Harris, like it really cements his value to me as an RB2 because now it's not going to be like we can run the ball using Justin Fields' legs, or if we got to, because that becomes stacking run plays now. Justin Fields, Najee, like the defense kind of knows like the offense is limited. So now when you can add the downfield passing, the defense has to respect the deep ball. That opens up lanes for a Najee Harris who had over 4 yards per carry yesterday. Like, this is what we want to see. 100-yard games, like when you're able to have that kind of production out of a Najee who looks strong, able to, use Jalen Warren there in the to kind of offset that in the passing game a little bit and in the run game. I just feel like it opens up a lot of things. And then especially for like just George Pickens as well, even though he didn't have like a mega game, right? Like, 5 catches for 111 yards, a TD, like that's a good game, but I feel like there's still more out there for
Yeah.
George Pickens. And, for a guy with only 5 catches, like he had a really good game. Russ kind of just unlocks everything here. Pat
Yeah.
Fryermuth was good. And I think Jalen Warren, who's, you mentioned Najee Harris being dropped. I think Jalen Warren's worth an ad right now. He should
Yeah.
not be on waivers, should be one of the top waiver guys if he's available in your league. But I think Jalen Warren is going to be unlocked here too. I feel really good overall about this Steeler offense. Now, obviously, we talk about it next week. They got the Giants, and then we got the bye coming up for the Steelers. Immediately, what are you doing with George Pickens? Are you calling him a wide receiver too now? Is it time to do that?
Yeah, I would say so. And the reason why is the biggest problem for George, and I liked him heading into the season because I thought Russell Wilson was going to be the team's starting quarterback. But then he had that calf injury and then, took him a while to get healthy. But I liked, and we saw the potential last night with George Pickens and why Russell Wilson makes sense because he's going to throw that ball up there. Like he gives his guy a chance. And really with George, like that's all you kind of want because he just is able to make these spectacular type of catches. So I think so as well. And then the biggest thing I don't think that this can be understated just is I know it's maybe just one game and we'll see how the season plays out, but just keeping this offense on schedule. I think that one of the biggest things that was overstated this offseason was how Arthur Smith is this bad OC. Like he's had good years in Tennessee. It's just as a head coach, some guys just aren't made out to be head coaches, and he's probably one of those guys. He's just not made to be a head coach. But as an OC, he's a pretty good OC who's able to be creative enough, get his playmakers the ball. And their last, I want to say 5-6 drives the Steelers had last night were all scoring drives, field goals, touchdowns. They finished the night off with 2 70-yard drives that ended up in touchdowns. I mean, that's not what Pittsburgh has done for years. So it's exciting with Russell Wilson, and hopefully, he may even get better as the season progresses too, because I also think that's another thing that was kind of overstated was he was washed. He was
Yep.
actually decent last year. He put up respectable stats, and now he's in this situation. So I just think George Pickens for sure. I think he's a wide receiver 2 going forward, and there's a lot of potential here. I don't want to say a lot of potential, but there's
No,
potential for where it
I
was.
think you're right. I think you're right. And there's somebody in your league who's probably going to be like, oh, sell high on George Pickens and think
Oh,
like,
for
oh,
sure.
this was just one of those games. This isn't a sell high moment. This is now you're getting the production that we were expecting this offseason when there was a lot of hype about George Pickens and we hadn't seen it. I think, in the community, we're probably like, yo, like George Pickens, this is kind of a buy low moment for him. We knew he couldn't be this bad for this long, especially if Russ was able to air the ball out. And to me, Russ looks like the missing piece for this team. Like that already had a solid defense. The run game is there. It's kind of like he just unlocks everything. And I think Russ to me is a QB2 the rest of the way. Like I would feel good, maybe not every week, but I would feel good about Russell being my starting quarterback. If say you had Anthony Richardson and he was disappointing you, or maybe you drafted Patrick Mahomes and you're looking for a little bit more upside. Like I would be okay right now if you're searching for answers at quarterback in single QB leagues, starting Russell Wilson in games, even with tough matchups. Like I just think he provides that ceiling. We didn't even see a whole lot of scrambling out of him. And we know that's part of his game too. So I feel like with this Steeler team, man, it was a blessing in disguise that Russ kind of got hurt. That Justin Fields is good enough to win games now if needed. But we also know like the true identity of this offense is really unlocked with Russ, man. So any chance, like I know last week we were talking about the bye and Justin Fields. We're gonna find any chance Justin Fields sees the field this season.
I mean,
outside of Russ injury.
Unless Russ just looks abysmal next week, and it looked like the first quarter. I mean, maybe, but like the way this offense. I mean, as a Steelers fan, I haven't seen the offense move like that, and since last year of AB and Ben. So it looked good, and I don't want to overreact to one game, but it was the New York Jets who. A lot of people thought they were going to turn the corner with Devontae Adams, and Pittsburgh crushed them in the second half. Like it wasn't even a game. It was a blowout. So I think it probably Russ for the rest of the year, unless catastrophic meltdown, which I don't think is going to happen.
There would be, it would take Russ playing. The thing is, like you talked about, Russ has kind of been underrated here over the last couple of years. When's the last time he's really had talent around him? This is probably the best, and I don't even think this is like a great football team, but this is probably the best collection of talent Russ has had around him in a while.
And once again, he wasn't even bad last year. I don't like people just say I want to say he didn't even play the last 2 or 3 games or something because they benched him, and he's still. I think he was like top 5 in touchdowns. Yeah, he was in passing touchdowns last year. Like, he wasn't bad.
He had over
sure, it wasn't always great
last year, dude.
Yeah, so it's I don't know. People always overreact to 1 year, and it just didn't work out. Sometimes it didn't work. It doesn't work out with players in certain situations. It didn't work out, but definitely trending up for the Steelers players going forward.
Well, trending up for your team and trending down for mine off of a bad loss for the 49ers, bro. I know we played the Chiefs, and it just couldn't have been any worse, right? Got beat. Brock Purdy obviously didn't play a great game, but I think the major downfall of this game was losing Brandon Aiyuk for the rest of the season. Looks like it's a torn ACL. Obviously, nothing has been fully confirmed, but that seems the way that it's trending is torn ACL, unfortunately, for Brandon Aiyuk, who I'm glad he got paid, man, because that would have been tragic if he did.
Yeah. I didn't think of that.
A lot here, bro, because it was also a game where we saw Deebo Samuel mysteriously pick up an illness right before the game, and he was out. We saw, obviously we knew Juwan Jennings wasn't playing. Ricky Pearsall came into the game. Jacob Cowling played into the game. So a lot here with the 49ers, and obviously, like, when you lose a guy like Brandon Aiyuk, you can't just one-on-one replace that. I think this is Debo and George Kittle time, and we're going to be expecting CMC back here. But I really think, Debo, who didn't play last week, might be a buy low guy because he didn't play. And so people are automatically going to, like, it's already a negative sentiment when you get a 0 on the scoreboard or you don't play. This might be the
Yeah.
time to trade for him, bro.
No, I agree. That's a good call out. And kind of going back to just Brock Purdy, just in general, like 46 points scored between these two teams, and Brock Purdy and Patrick Mahomes didn't even have a passing touchdown. Like that's kind of insane. So it was a weird game. I also think this kind of speaks to just the Chiefs. The Chiefs, even with Patrick Mahomes, he has not been playing that well this year compared to years past. Now there's winning. I just think this defense is really good. The Chiefs defense is legit. So, but going back to your question, yeah, I mean, if I could try to trade for Deebo Samuel, absolutely, because there was kind of an what's his face? Demario Douglas also had an illness this week too, and he only ran 10 routes of the 42 routes. And not, it's kind of off topic, but hockey too. There was a bunch of illnesses in hockey where these guys weren't even, I don't know, something maybe going around or something. Because then you had Kenneth Walker play, but he played fantastic.
Yep.
But yeah, so I would be trying to trade. Another guy that I think is definitely interesting is obviously Juwan Jennings. If I'm sure he was probably dropped by some people, and rightfully so, because Aiyuk and Debo were here healthy. But now he becomes like an absolute must-add player if he's available in your leagues. And then Ricky Pearsall is also kind of, I guess, interesting because there is opportunity here. That he'll probably be the third wide receiver, or not the third. Well, third. He'll be the third wide receiver now going forward. So it's interesting. But Jacob Cowing too is another guy who, I don't want to just say he's nothing, because he did have 3 targets. So it was only 3 targets. He had that one big catch for like 40 some yards or something. But a guy that I want to be picking up, just a guy that I would kind of want to keep a mental note, because he's a guy that I liked in the pre-draft process. I thought he had good underlying metrics. So just somebody that is interesting.
That's the thing about this Niner team, is that we know the weapons. Like, it's been CMC, Debo, Aiyuk, Kittle. Like, we knew that coming into the year. And then Jordan Mason now enters the fold, and Juwan Jennings at times enter the fold. And it's like, there's normally not a lot of room on this Niner offense for new pieces, but it seems like this thing might start to expand even more with all these injuries mounting up. Like, I think it's going to be the Niners are going to be a tough team to kind of gauge, because we know Debo's going to be there. We know Kittle's going to be there. But like, Juwan Jennings isn't Aiyuk. And as well as he played earlier this year, he's a complementary piece. I think he'll be a good piece, and he's probably the must-add of the week right now. But there's also going to be a mix. We saw Ricky Pearsall play like over 70% of the snaps yesterday. So I don't know about Jacob Cowing. Obviously, I think that's a little bit more long-term. But like, it reminds me a little bit more of who gets hot, as opposed to like Juwan Jennings is locked into this role. And
well, we know who's kind of George Kittle. If you draft the George Kittle, I mean, man, that's a W.
Yeah, he might be the best tight end the rest of the way.
Oh, absolutely. I think 100% now for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's in George Kittle, man. Like, that was a player that was sinking down draft boards because it was he wasn't Trey McBride. And
he's a boring pick. Yeah, he's just a boring, consistent top 5 tight end.
Dalton Kincaid, but every year he's a top 5 guy, and I think we might see like a really nice stretch of games here out of George Kittle. Do you think he's a number 1? You think he's over like Trey McBride, Travis Kelce?
Yeah, I would say he's right there. Like there's a clear top 3. I would still prefer him. I would want him over Kyle Pitts. I think Kyle Pitts has been playing better as of late. But definitely like George Kittle, just because George Kittle offers a lot of touchdown upside too. Like he's a red zone machine. I just think he's the best. I've always thought he's the best, like, overall tight end in football for a while, because he's a very good blocker, which kind of also hurts him a little bit because he's sometimes at a higher risk of getting hurt, and we've seen it. But I just think he's fantastic. So I would say he's right there with Brock Bowers, though, because Brock Bowers had a really good week as well. But yeah, I would say for sure top 3, absolutely. And if you want to put him at 1, I mean, there's no, I'm fine with that.
I got a lot of George Kittle shares, so I'm a very happy George Kittle and George Pickens, the 2 Georges.
There you go, the Georges.
Yeah.
How about Brock Purdy though?
Yeah, I was gonna say one last thing. Brock Purdy, man, how are you feeling about? Because I'm concerned, fantasy wise. I'm concerned without Aiyuk. I think this offense looks a little, but I'm concerned until probably about week 10 when it seems like we might be having an interesting guy return.
Yeah, and that's as long as which they say that's the target date, right? And hopefully he does come back, because I do think that will give this offense the kind of juice it needs right now, because it has not been great really for San Francisco this season. They've been really disappointing, honestly. But
Yeah.
teams get hot, and we know this. And CMC, we know how good he is, and as long as he's able to come back and he's the player that he was, last year, I think things will be fine. So right now with Brock Purdy, in one quarterback leagues, you just don't really trade quarterbacks. Like nobody really wants a quarterback, or no one, like they don't really move. Maybe in super flex, I think it becomes an interesting kind of like buy low candidate if you're able to actually buy low on him, because we know how good this offense can be. And I think that even this year with the guys healthy, like when Aiyuk was healthy, Debo, Kittle, it still wasn't the same. Like CMC just provides a different element to this offense than those other guys can. So once CMC comes back, and as long as he is like the player that he has been, I think Brock Purdy will return to kind of what he was before.
The one thing about him is he's found ways, like even though he didn't pass the ball very well, got 2 rushing scores in. So it seems like Brock Purdy just like always finds a way, whether it's like a dump off to a running back, like he always finds ways to just be involved.
Yeah.
And I would say the saving grace for this Niners passing attack is we have a really fantasy friendly playoff schedule for the passing game. We got the Rams, we got at Miami, which should be a shootout at that point with Tua back, and then we got Detroit in the last game. So that'd be a saving grace for this passing attack, is that maybe you go buy a Brock Purdy right now, as you kind of, even though the fantasy production has been there, on tape it looks worse. So maybe the perception gives you a little bit of a buy low opportunity there.
He's just turned the ball over. He hasn't really done that in the past. Like he's been pretty clean. Now this year he's just turned the ball over quite a bit.
They're asking him to do more. And
Yeah,
sometimes
that's
when you're
true.
asked to do more in the offense, you get a little bit more exposed. A very similar kind of offense, and they're glad to get their quarterback back. Tua Tagovailoa returning to the Miami Dolphins.
Thank God.
Tyler. Much needed, bro. Because this was ugly. This was worse. Even coming out of the bye, Tyler, I was like, yo, I think Tyreek, he'll be fine. Jalen Waddle, they'll probably scheme some things up. This offense don't even look half of what it is with Tua gone. Like Tyler Huntley starting, that had to change. And then Tim Boyle comes into the game. I think overall, all of us in the fantasy community are like, thank God Tua, and I didn't realize how bad it was going to be without him. But Tyreek, man, Jalen Waddle, I mean, this has to be the one time you're going to be able to get these guys for less than face value, right?
Absolutely. And so I went in one of my leagues, I have Tyreek Hill, right? And this is like my favorite, my league with all my high school friends. It's like my most competitive league. Heading into the weekend, right? I had, heading into the 1:00 slates, I had Tank Bigsby already and Denver's defense. So I already had like 40 some points scored. And I was like, oh man, I'm going to easily win this. I was already projected. I had Tyreek Hill, I had Tank Dell, and I had Jaden Reed. My 3 starting wide receivers totaled like 4 points for me. So it was absolutely, I was so pissed. I'm still like kind of salty about this, because I even
still fuming right now.
I had Jaden Daniels too. So it was like this, so many things, and Travis Kelce, who was asked to. Anyways, so this team just rough. But yeah, I think like if anybody, if fantasy managers are smart, right? I don't think that they would be selling Tyreek Hill or any of these guys. We know what their true potential is. We saw it early in the season. Now, if there's some managers that are like, I'm worried that, potentially Tua could get hurt again or whatever, I'd be buying up, because we just know. I also think a little bit of a narrative on my part. Tua's going to come back into this thing with like this chip on his shoulder. You know what I mean? Like people are kind of saying I should retire. I should hang it up. Nah. This offense been awful. They paid me. Now they know, hey, look at this product you're putting out there on a week-to-week basis. It's been awful. So I just kind of like this narrative thing where this team has looked bad, and I think they just it's a complete 180. We know how explosive they can be. I have a lot of hope going forward because of these players. It's not like they've been bad. It's just the quarterback situation. This offense is just not the same without a guy who understands the system, who can actually make the throws, stay in rhythm with this offense. So I'd be buying up all these Dolphins players. I would even be buying up Jalen Wright, who probably isn't very expensive, just because we have,
so?
I'll be buying him up, not because he's more of a stash kind of player. Absolutely. But the potential is massive just because you have, Devon Achane's been banged up already so far this season. Raheem Mostert's been banged up. He's a clear RB3, and I think he would step into a massive role. So I'd be buying up all these guys if I can.
There's a two-part thing here because I love the excitement. I love that Tua's back, and I understand what he's going to do for this Dolphins offense. Like Jalen Waddle obviously gets bumped up from like barely playable flex to like, okay, strong wide receiver 3, back end wide receiver 2. It's just who he is as a player. Tyreek goes from like middling, very questionable, risky wide receiver 2 to elite top 5 wide receiver just off this one move, right? But to me, the one thing that is also at play here is in a couple weeks, it's documented. Once the weather gets a little bit more of a factor, once this cold sets in, this timing offense gets thrown off a little bit. So I think you have a really good window here to like recoup some of the value that you lost from a Tyreek, from a Tua, from a Devon Achane, and more so the passing game than the run game. Because what happens with this Dolphins team typically is as the wind becomes a little bit more of a factor, they have to lean onto the run game. We see a little bit more of a Devon Achane. We'll see a little bit more probably a Raheem Mostert. As you mentioned, Jalen Wright could become a factor. So I kind of think Raheem Mostert is a little bit of a buy low guy. Like if out of this entire committee, you got to pay full price right now for Tyreek. You got to pay, Jalen Waddle's probably another good buy low guy. Devon Achane, you're not probably getting Devon Achane at low cost. But I think Raheem Mostert might be a player who I wouldn't advocate for him as like an RB2, so to speak, but more so just like a piece on your bench you can get in a deal that's not going to cost you at a very thin position right now in fantasy.
Yeah. And kind of what you were saying too, the weather change. But I also look at their schedule, and I was worried about their schedule heading into the season. But now, and this is why, in my opinion, we just don't look at the schedule because things will change a lot throughout the season. Cleveland, we are really worried about Cleveland. Yeah. I wouldn't be worried about Cleveland at all anymore right now.
Well, New York Jets. Different. At Cleveland is different.
Okay, sure. The New York Jets, I mean, they have not been playing very well. Maybe they get hot, but if this thing continues with the Jets, how it's going right now, is this going to be a team that is going to be motivated later in the season? I don't know. So I would be buying up and the other thing with the Dolphins too, last thing, they already had their bye, which is important as well. So you don't got to worry about that bye. We'll see. It all depends on how expensive they'll be. But like you said, Tyreek Hill is probably borderline on. You probably could have bought him, when Tua first went down, but now, yeah, I don't think you'll be able to get it.
He's back at full price, and I think this Dolphins team just in general is probably going to have a couple strong weeks here. We got at home against Arizona, we got at Buffalo, which should be somewhat of a shootout, and then you got at the Rams, right? And then you got the Raiders. So before we even step into the second half of the year, we got some plus matchups for the most part here. Obviously, the Bills a little tougher, but some plus matchups here on paper. I think this could be a really good time to like get the maximum value you can. And then the trade deadline is right around week 11 in most leagues. So if you have any issues or maybe you're looking to sell high at that point, that would be the time to do it. Right now, get your value back because this offense is going to hum. The one thing that I am a little concerned about, though, I'm not going to lie to you, is I love Mike McDaniel and everything that he brings to the table. I think he's a great coach. But is this offense a little like too predictable at times, so to speak? Like I think that was the reason we saw Devon Achane being used at like as slot and throwing him the ball a little bit more earlier in the year, right? Like we saw that kind of that wrinkle was thrown in there. Last year it was the speed motion behind the line of scrimmage with Tyreek Hill getting the guys going, and I think this has become a little, unfortunately, it's been kind of like gimmicky in a way. This Miami offense has been, and I kind of wonder like. Maybe when they play bad defenses, this is a good team, but like when they play good defenses, is it like a gimmick offense and they're going to get, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I'm concerned a little bit about this offense just in general.
I mean, looking at the schedule though, we only have to really worry about Buffalo for basically until the Green Bay Packers look pretty legit defensively. Yeah. So the Patriots, oh man, I mean, the run defense is atrocious right now, but really, it's just Buffalo. You got a ton of great matchups. And like you said, though, you could, I wouldn't, if I had Dolphins players, you could potentially cash out right now just because I think the value is incredibly high. But I would give it a couple weeks because these are some really, really good matchups that they should absolutely take advantage of. And then if you're, a little skeptical of the late season, sure, I would sell then. I wouldn't sell yet. I would give them a couple weeks. And then because also I don't want to put it out there, but you always have the re-injury to Tua
Yeah,
potentially,
yeah.
which we know. My God, you can't even start them. You can't
No.
even start these guys without Tua. Like Tyreek Hill, 5 points, 5 points, 6 points, 9.1 has not been startable. That's not startable.
Damn.
So, yeah, I would just kind of let it play out a little bit and then maybe look to sell high.
I didn't think there was a world, Tyler, where we're like, yeah, he's been healthy the whole year and he's not a top 40 receiver.
This is
There's no
insane.
world in my head would I've ever thought that.
It's insane. I mean, especially after week 1 because he puts up 23 points and you're like, this is Tyreek Hill, and then it's just. Yeah, it's been awful.
The major piece there, Jalen Waddle, bro. We got to see something out of him because this has been a terrible. Like if you drafted Jalen Waddle as your wide receiver 3, it's been like absolutely abysmal.
I mean, if you drafted any of these guys,
yeah,
it's been awful. It's just been it's a situation where the quarterback to an offense just matters so much, and it's a massive hit when you get these guys in here who. I don't know why the fuck Tim Boyle's even playing. This guy should not even be a starting quarterback. I don't know. I don't understand.
And been better.
Seriously, I don't know what the hell they're thinking, but
you talk about quarterback. Quarterback does matter, man. And like you can see one of the clear evident teams of this is Geno Smith in the Seattle Seahawks team right now. This has been one of the best cases of like, quarterback play matters because last year, obviously under Pete Carroll, the Seahawks were just like massively run focused. It was like, we're not airing the ball out. And you go get a guy like JSN, you don't use him in the right manner. So you get rid of Shane Waldron. And it's like Ryan Grubb, now Mike McDonald's taking over. Like Ryan Grubb has these guys airing it the fuck out.
Yeah.
Like Geno looks amazing this year. And you start to look at these passing game options. It's like DK has been elite. JSN has had times where he looks elite. Noah Fant has been like tight end 2 worthy, kind of where he was before. But like the biggest beneficiary of this all wasn't even on the field for 2 weeks. Kenneth Walker. I mean, he's absolutely smashing at cost right now. You talk about top 5 to 10 option rest of the year in Geno Smith, top 5 to 10 option in Kenneth Walker. And then probably a top 12 option the rest of the way in DK Metcalf, man. Talk about the Seattle offense and really just like Geno Smith, man. He's turned this thing around for them.
I love Kenneth Walker heading into the season. And the one thing that was always kind of the question mark with Kenneth Walker was the receiving profile. Even going back to college, was not a big receiver. But he's been capable. I would say kind of like Jonathan Taylor was when he was RB1. Jonathan Taylor's not a good receiving back, but he can do it. And I look at Kenneth Walker kind of the same way. He's not a good receiving back, but he's capable of doing it. So Kenneth Walker, and he's also playing like 70%, 65% of the snaps. And I look at Kenneth Walker and the one thing too, last year when I was looking at it, there was 3 running backs that absolutely stood out in terms of efficiency metrics. There's 2 that I always look at. It's missed tackles forced per touch, and it's explosive play per touch. And there was 3 running backs. Brian Thomas was at the near top of the league. It was Devon Achane. Well, I won't even include Devon Achane. It was Brian Robinson. I'm sorry, Brian Thomas. Brian Robinson. Yeah. Brian Robinson.
That's a whole conversation for another day.
Chase Brown was the other one, and it was Kenneth Walker. Those were the 3 guys who were at the top along with Devon Achane. So I think Kenneth Walker is one of the better just pure running backs in the NFL, one of the best pure running backs. So, and this team is just, they're throwing the ball at the highest rate. He's being used in the receiving game as well. I think this is a guy that has easy top 5 potential that I wish I would have drafted a little bit more of. I didn't draft as much just because I was always kind of going like, the tight ends in that range, which was a massive mistake. But I did get a lot of him as well, like a decent amount, especially in best ball. He was my favorite. He's one of my top drafted players along with Rashee Rice, RIP Rashee Rice. RIP. But Kenneth Walker in best ball was going in like the 6th, 7th round, which was insane. So in best ball, he was an absolute, he was a great
I
value.
remember years ago, I was on a podcast. I don't have to talk about the podcast. I don't have to talk much about the take because I think people will remember this very, very clearly. And I was asked, who would you rather have in fantasy football? Would you rather have Kenneth Walker or would you rather have Damian Pierce? And it kind of led to like me going viral a little bit because I talked about how effortless things looked for Kenneth Walker and how
Yeah.
that doesn't always translate. Like some other players, they gotta work a little harder for this shit. But Kenneth Walker is just one of those players who everything comes effortless. And I think the biggest question mark with Kenneth Walker was like, yo, is he going to get the receiving work that Ryan Grubb keeps talking about? Like
Yeah.
they're going to open up this passing game, and part of the thing with they bring in Zach Charbonnet, and he has the receiving chops, and he's going to be the 1A, the 1B to Kenneth Walker. All offseason, they were saying, yo, Kenneth Walker's our guy. We think he can carry more of the workload receiving wise. And one of my takes, I remember talking about this. I said, if Kenneth Walker gets receiving work, he's a top 5 back
Mhm.
because he already had the one thing that we wanted, and that was red zone work towards the end of last year. He was, touchdown after touchdown for Kenneth Walker. And we see that continuing this year. I mean, if he's going to get receiving work like this, where he's getting 3 to 5 catches a game, Tyler, it's like he literally could be a top 3 back the rest of the way on any given week. He carries the same type of like Brees Hall, Bijan Robinson type of appeal to me as a runner. So I think Kenneth Walker, man, probably, he was going top 15, top 20 in the running back range. We
Yeah.
massively undervalued what he was going to do because of the receiving work, bro. And I don't know. I just think he's part of what makes this whole Seattle offense go because it looks elite at times.
Yeah. No, 100%. He's been fantastic. And just real quick, because it came through, Brandon Aiyuk did tear his ACL. It's confirmed.
RIP to
So,
BA, man. BA.
so yeah.
Shout out, man. I'm glad he got paid, though. I'm glad he
Yeah,
got
hey,
paid,
a
bro.
good thing. So yeah, but no, Kenneth Walker, fantastic. You should view him as honestly a top 5 back. At the very least, absolute top 10, mid RB1 rest of the way with elite upside.
What about
And this had
Gino?
a
What about Gino, though? Because
I yeah.
Gino Tyler, he's
Mhm.
QB6, bro. And it looks, is it like, yo, we're just getting this Gino that's like playing out of his mind? It kind of looks effortless
He's playing
for
well.
Gino right now.
No, absolutely. And the biggest thing is kind of what you talked about. This team, he has the most passing attempts on the season. And they're slinging the rock. And what I will say is, I mean, you have Aaron Rodgers, who's second in the league in terms of passing attempts. He's been better than A-Rod, but it's just this. As long as they continue to play like they're playing, and they're throwing the ball at the highest rate in the NFL, I mean, absolutely, like this, he'll continue. Now, I will say, it's not that I question kind of his upside. I don't want to say I question his upside. I just there would I rather have let's see. I'm gonna look at it real quick. Would I rather have obviously like your mobile quarterbacks, Jalen
Right. Like
Hurts,
Lamar, Jaden
those kind of guys?
Daniels.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, and then I think he belongs in that next tier of guys when you have, you could even say, potentially Joe Burrow in
Yep.
that kind of range. One guy that I think is interesting as well, and maybe we'll talk about him a little bit later, but Drake Maye. I think he also becomes very interesting as well in this range of guys, just because that rushing upside. So, yeah, I mean, going forward, absolutely, he becomes like a back end quarterback one, high end QB2 going forward, as long as they continue to throw the ball like they're throwing it.
So you talk about back end QB1. Right now he's a QB6.
Mhm.
And when I think about like who would you rather have, right? Like Geno Smith or Jared Goff, who you rather have?
He's right there. I guess if I had to take a stab at one, probably Gino. If they continue to throw
Let's
the
call
ball
them
like they
similar.
are.
We'll call that like the line, right? Like
Yeah,
that's the
yeah.
line. We'll call it the line. So we got Geno or Dak. Who would you rather have the rest of the year?
I would go with Dak. I have faith that offense turns it around.
Okay, what about Geno or CJ Stroud?
I'd go with CJ.
That's an interesting one. Geno or Pat Mahomes? That's crazy. That's a wild question.
Hey, I said it last week. Patrick Mahomes has one 20-point game in his last 15 regular season starts. That's bad.
He's a QB2.
That's not that's bad.
He's a
Like,
QB2.
I would say probably Geno, especially because once again they're throwing the ball at the highest rate in the NFL. You want that volume. He could lead the NFL in passing attempts. That's
Yeah,
valuable.
he's up there. He's up there. I'd rather, to be honest, like if I was moving pieces right now, I might want Geno over CJ Stroud because I feel like that Texans offense, which we'll talk about here in a minute, might be a little bit more Joe Mixon led than we think. And I just think Geno, man, he's a good quarterback, bro. And I think it's easy to forget, what was he, a top 5 quarterback just 2 years ago?
Well,
In
the
this
thing too is you could probably get Geno. You could probably trade for Geno and get like plus if you traded CJ Stroud.
CJ Stroud for Geno and
Yeah.
probably a good starter.
Yeah, like is that something you could probably do? That's honestly, that's not that. It's not even. It's probably not even a drop off at all. You're
No, you
getting
might
like
be
the
able to do
same
that with like
production.
Dak or Burrow. Like the name value of what you could do with a Geno, I
Yeah.
think it's there. A quarterback I wouldn't want to trade for Geno is Jordan Love, who's been playing at an incredible rate here, bro. He easily looks like a top 5 guy. But Jordan Love, man, has got this offense humming. He's a top 10 quarterback on the season, and he missed 3 games. Was it 3 games he did? So I think when we look at Jordan Love, man, what he's bringing to this Packer offense, obviously a good win over the Texans and a little back and forth there with Stephon Diggs and Jair Alexander. But to me, the story of this game was, obviously like Josh Jacobs got going. And we see, we didn't really need Jaden Reed, who had been phenomenal throughout the start of the year. We didn't really need him because Romeo Doubs stepped up. And it's like the offense with Jordan Love is elite and really has a lot of like top 12 options here for the Packers. Like we can go through the positions. There's a lot of good options. Do you think this offense stays like this? Do you think Jordan Love is able to keep up this pace and he's an elite guy? Do you think he settles down somewhere into that range we just talked about with like the Burrows, the Daks, where he was drafted at? Or do you think we now have an elite quarterback who's going to carry an elite offense?
I think so. The league guys, in my opinion, the league guys I just view as like your mobile quarterbacks, right? So that's the elite tier. I would say I don't think he can get in. I don't think he'll be in that tier with like Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Jaden Daniels, those kind of guys, just because they offer that rushing upside that Jordan Love doesn't. But I do think that he can be in that next tier, the Joe Burrow tier, the CJ Stroud tier of type of guys, your pocket passing quarterbacks. Because really, since the second half of last year, when this offense actually got healthy and even into the playoffs, he's been fantastic. Like he's been one of the best quarterbacks in the league, not just in fantasy football. In
Yes.
terms of like real life football, he's been excellent. I was trying to look up his big time throws. I don't have it up right now. But he's been fantastic. So and the other thing too is there's just so many. This team in general is just so young, and they have a lot of very good young talent, especially at your wide receiver position, your tight end position, where I don't even think that these guys have fully reached their potential, and they're also getting better. And the wide receiver position is like this rotation as well, that they continue to rotate these guys in and out. Jordan Love was banged up, so I don't even think it's at its full potential yet, that it could potentially even get a little bit better. So absolutely, I think he's one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL, and should be viewed that way. I would say near borderline elite in fantasy football.
The thing is, you mentioned the rushing quarterbacks, right? Like, so we talking about Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Jaden Daniels, Lamar Jackson. I think that's the clear
Yeah,
four
the
that you're
4.
talking
Yeah.
about when it comes to mobile. But like Jordan Love on a per game basis right now is right up there with all of them. And it's because of the touchdowns. Like he continues to throw touchdowns at an elite rate. And I think that was his upside last year. Like earlier in the year when he first became the starter, he was really up and down. And then from like week 10, week 11 on, I want to say he was like the QB2, like right behind Dak Prescott as like the QB2. So I think that Jordan Love is like kind of one of those assets where like maybe we undervalue, like we still haven't got to the world where we view Jordan Love as basically Patrick Mahomes. Like to me, that's almost what he is in this offense, because it's not like he doesn't have the star receiver. If Jaden Reed was considered to be Tyreek Hill, or if he was considered to be Justin Jefferson, I think we'd be looking at Jordan Love a little bit differently. If it was Stephon Diggs out there and Nico Collins, we'd be like, oh shit, Jordan Love is like, he's him. But because he doesn't have the names, because it's Tucker Kraft and Jaden Reed and Christian Watson, Romeo, we're not viewing him the same way. Jordan Love is probably going to be a top 5 quarterback the rest of the way. And I would say he offers a little bit more stability than even some of your other rushing quarterbacks, than your Lamar, Jaden Daniels, who just got hurt. He offers a little bit more stability. He's already been hurt too. That gives you a little bit, you know what I'm saying? Like most of the time, players, quarterbacks at least, don't get multiple injuries in the same season. So I don't know. I think he just makes this whole offense go. I really love, no pun intended, I love getting Jordan Love as your starter. And right now, if you have him, don't think this is a window to be like, oh man, let me trade off Jordan Love. Like, keep Jordan Love as a top elite asset, in my opinion. I just don't see a world where he doesn't, and it's helping out the rest of this offense too.
Yeah, the offense looks good.
You look at Josh Jacobs. Like, Josh Jacobs was a player that I was kind of questioning, because I was like, yo, this is time to buy low on Josh. I was kind of questioning Josh Jacobs. And then he comes out and has the game that we were looking for. He gets 76 yards, a bunch of catches in the passing game. It wasn't a huge game, but it was like a sign of life from a guy that was, he was a back end RB2 at best. You think he bounces back here in the second half, or you kind of avoided Josh Jacobs?
No, absolutely. I would continue to buy. I think this is a guy who can be a back end RB1 for the rest of the way. There's just, the volume's been there. His snap percentage, his route participation, everything's been there. It's the touchdowns, which we know touchdowns are fluky, but this is, with Jordan Love, this is one of the best offenses in the NFL. So I really do think that the touchdowns will come. And usually when we've seen this, you see this a lot. Now, sometimes it doesn't actually happen, and he just doesn't, it's a down year in terms of touchdown production. But a lot of times you see this thing correct itself. And when it corrects itself, it's a lot of touchdowns in bunches. So he could be at the second half of the season. He could be a top 5 running back for the second half of the year, just because those touchdowns really pile up. That I really do think that this is all he needs. It's just the touchdown production, and because everything else is there. He's borderline, I would say, elite usage. It's just the touchdowns haven't came.
It's good to see like Jordan Love will throw him the football too. Like,
he was getting first touchdown reception in his career, which is crazy.
That's crazy, ain't it?
Yeah,
I got a feeling it won't be the last this year too. Like,
well, Jordan Love, even in the beginning of the year, he said it too. Jordan Love said, "I'm going to get him his first touchdown reception this year." So they made it a conscious effort, and I just think, Josh Jacobs, we know how good he is. He's a good running back playing on an elite offense. I would still be buying low, because I don't think people truly understand the upside that he possesses, in my opinion.
The Packers in the second half, when I mentioned this a lot, and maybe this is
weather
a topic.
Yes.
Yeah, the weather. It gets colder, and you got those NFC North opponents where things get colder when you go play Chicago. You know what I mean? And it's like you have to factor that in. It's cold in Green Bay. It snows, and that's what you do. You run the football, and when football gets a little tighter in those, in those conferences, in those divisions where weather becomes an issue, you got to start running the football. That's why you go sign Josh Jacobs for 4 years. So I definitely think there's an arc here where Josh Jacobs, you talk about top 5 finish. If we looked at like week 11 to week 17,
exactly,
and we talked about Josh Jacobs on a per game average,
could be top 5.
Absolutely.
Right. I can foresee that.
What about this other running back, man? He missed some time and came back right where he left off. Joe Mixon, bro, for the Texans. It's a great thing. Obviously, I liked Joe Mixon this offseason, but it's a good thing, I think, in real football. Obviously, they played the Packers and lost. It's a good thing in real football, though, when you can have a really strong run game. You got a running back that can catch the ball, receive the ball. I think for fantasy, though, it might be a little bit disappointing for those who have the passing game. You think Joe Mixon's in this role? You think he's locked into like this, I am going to have a massive amount of touches, 25 to 30, because that's what it looks like it's going to be, 25 to 30 touches a game. You think he's locked into this role for the rest of the year for the Texans, or you think this is like Nico Collins is out, they're trying to do something else with the football?
So I mentioned earlier in the show that one of my biggest mistakes was definitely, I learned my mistake. I'm not drafting a tight end next year. I'm not even going to draft one. I'm literally going to just pick one up after the season starts. Because I love Joe Mixon, and I've been a very big Joe Mixon fan for a long time. I remember for years I've been talking, even this year, I had him ranked as a top 12 running back.
Yeah.
It's just, I didn't draft him a whole lot because I had Kenneth Walker. Like, I like Kenneth Walker, and once again, I liked going those tight ends in that range, was a massive mistake. Anyways, I really do, and the reason why I think that Joe Mixon, I like Joe Mixon a lot heading into the season, was Devin Singletary last year. We saw it. I'm sorry, but Devin Singletary is just a guy. He's a jag. Like, that's what he is. He's in the NFL. Salute to him. Amazing, but like, he's not Joe Mixon. And Joe Mixon, this team not only traded for Joe Mixon, but then they gave him an extension. So you knew this team was going to feature him. And this offense, I'm not worried about the passing attack because Nico Collins been hurt. We've seen elite usage from this passing attack. Also, the offensive line has not been playing very well in terms of like pass pro. So I think that they have some things to work out. But the nice thing about Joe Mixon is just he's a workhorse running back in a very good offense that I don't think has really hit its stride. So for me, Joe Mixon is just a guy that I firmly believe he'll see a massive amount of volume. He'll see touchdowns because this offense will be in those scoring opportunities, and he's continuously every single year just a top 10 back in fantasy that people hate because it's like George Kittle where they just get bored and it keeps doing the same thing he's always done, and that's scoring fantasy points.
And it's tough, man, because I think I never really, you talk about the durability for Joe Mixon. It's like I never really thought of him as like this guy that could handle 25, 30 touches a game, but it's like that's who he is. He's a durable, big, prototypical size back.
Dude is thick. He's big.
Yeah. It's like he does everything well. So, and then when he went to the Texans, they already got Damian Pierce. We saw Cam Akers early in the offseason. It was like, maybe they don't have to use him. They'll save him. But it's like he doesn't play 100% of the snaps. But when he's in, he sees the damn football.
Yeah, he gets.
I mean, over the offseason, he said, this is an offense where I see myself getting 300 carries. There was a talk, I'm going to lead the league in carries. And that was an interesting comment because I was like, damn, if he leads the league in carries, he's already a receiving back. He's probably going to see somewhere between 350, 400 touches. And I mean, that looks like it's going to come to fruition here. It looks like he's going to be the kind of back that sees the workload that he was talking about. We're talking about 20-point weeks here almost every week. I don't see a world where Joe Mixon, outside of, health, obviously, on a per game basis, I don't see a world where we don't have Joe Mixon as a top 5 back the rest of the year. I can't fathom it in this offense.
Yeah. I would say, borderline top 5. I definitely top, I would say inside the top 10, 100%.
He's top 5. Like, think about it. Top 5, right? So you want to say, I know Brees probably up there for you. Saquon is up there for you. Who else? For sure. Maybe Bijan. We can talk Bijan. We can talk
we knew stuff would happen, right? Like the freak out of Bijan and Brees and they bounce back. I still would have those guys. Like Kenneth Walker's right there. Like he's right there. I just don't know if he actually fully finishes top 5. I just think he's in that mix of like, once again, I really do think Josh Jacobs, the second half of the year, is going to be on a tear. I think he'll finish great. There will be somebody else. Like there's always somebody. I mean, you still have Derrick Henry who's killing it right now. And I think that Alvin Kamara will bounce back as long as that offense gets
I think he's the one that slips out. I think he's the one that kind of like fades out just because he's a little more inconsistent. You know what I mean?
But we see it like Jahmyr Gibbs is another guy that blew up this week. We always see these kind of guys, and I'm not taking anything away from Joe Mixon. I think he'll be a borderline top 5 guy. He'll finish top 12, which he's done literally every single year.
Like the problem I'm with that. I'm like, yo, the touches. He's 20. Unless he is hurt, he's going to be 25 to 30 touches. It looks when he plays a healthy game script, that's what it calls for. So like maybe you could say it's because Nico's out, but like literally we saw 30 carries week 1. He was on that trajectory in week 2 before he got hurt. Obviously was hurt in his last game. And then this week, same thing. He had 30 touches this week. I don't know what the touches were, but he had like 30 touches this week. And if you're getting 30 touchdowns in a football game where the team will use you exclusively in the red zone too, I don't know what his red zone percentage looks like either, but they're featuring him in the red zone, like giving him multiple opportunities.
The only thing I would say is I don't think he'll get 30 touches. I think that they'll start to tone it down just a little bit because he's an older player. You don't want, and this team has Super Bowl aspirations. Like this team wants to win a title, and they could potentially really have I don't want to say a good shot, but could maybe challenge the Chiefs depending on how the season ends up finishing. But so the only pushback that I'll say is I still think that he's easily top 10, borderline top 5, right around that top 5 range. But I do think the touches will come down just a little bit just to keep him a little bit fresh for the playoff push that they want. That's the
I'm
only
not
thing.
mad at that. Not mad at that. Do you think it's going to limit CJ Stroud at all? Because I mean, CJ Stroud, he
I
was drafted universally as like a top 5
Yeah, which
guy.
we talked about this in the
Yeah.
summer. That was a massive. He should not have been going there. Um, uh, no, I think that he'll be okay. I just don't think he'll ever pay off the price that you're drafting him at. Is the problem?
Yeah.
Once Nico comes back, I do think this offense will really find a groove, especially the passing offense will find its groove, will find its footing. He'll finish the season really strong, but will he return the top 5, top 6, top 7 value that he drafted him at? Probably not.
I mean, he's only had one 20-point game all year. It's crazy. And he just came off a game where he was under double digits.
That
Like,
was this past game, the Packers game, he didn't. I don't even think he threw for 100 yards. Yeah, he only had 86 passing yards.
oh my God. And
It
it's
was
like,
rough.
that's to me, I look at CJ Stroud and I think the name, we got enamored with the name and that really hot stretch he had in the middle of the year last year where he was throwing, I mean, it would look like every game they were scoring 40 points, but it's a different offense. And I think D'Amico Ryans wants to run this offense through Joe Mixon, play defense. Like, this seems like that's the way that this thing is going to trend. So I think for those who have CJ Stroud, like, strategy talk here, I'll be looking to move CJ Stroud. And I think
I'd be
there's
looking
not enough
same with
panic though.
Mahomes. You get
Yeah.
you get the you get the name value, and the name value sometimes just trumps actual production. Like we talked about, the one prime example is there's probably still people. Well, not that they played in prime time, so maybe not even more. But people probably were still thinking the New Orleans Saints were still a good football team.
Yeah.
It's not a good football team anymore. They're so banged up. They're bad. They're one of the worst football teams in the NFL. And I still think people, I guarantee there's casuals out there that if you said Patrick Mahomes is not a top 12 fantasy quarterback, they'd be like, no way. You're
Yeah.
lying. There's
Yeah.
no way he's not. Go check it. I don't even know.
Because
He's got to be
it's
outside the top.
bad. I mean, it's
Yeah,
bad for Mahomes right
and
now.
you could get good value just because of the name. So absolutely, I would look to sell CJ Stroud. Honestly, I would look to sell if I had like CJ Stroud and I could get, we talked about Geno Smith, even a guy I talk about him all the time, Drake Maye. Give me Drake Maye and a
Oh,
piece.
we
You
got a
can
little
get a
love affair
piece.
here, Tyler. A little love
Drake,
affair here with Drake
Drake
May,
Maye,
huh?
first 2 games, 20-point games back to back. You said it. CJ Stroud has 1. So he's
Yeah.
already beaten CJ Stroud. And the nice thing about Drake Maye too, like CJ Stroud, this team has no run game. They have no defense. So it's literally Drake Maye is going to sling the rock and just throw it down 20 with a bad defense. Hell yeah, sign me up for that. That's the kind of quarterback I want in fantasy.
It's like at the end, they're going to be down in most games. And, even last week, we didn't get to see his legs a whole lot, but like he runs the rock a lot too. And
Yeah,
I don't know, he's got the
give
big
me
arm.
that.
There's shit to be scared of with Drake May. It's
No,
like,
it's just total upside.
where do you got him at though? You're excited about him. Like,
Hell
where do you
yeah.
got him at?
This is like everything that you want a fantasy quarterback to be. You want him to be mobile. He's mobile enough. He's mobile. I would say he's like Josh Allen-esque mobile. That's what
Yes.
you want him to be. So he's mobile enough that he's able to be a threat in the red zone, especially once they get near the goal line. He can easily score. He's got a cannon, so he brings those big explosive plays that you want. And then he just has a bad defense. Like that's like a dream fantasy quarterback. That's literally if Josh Allen had the worst defense in the league and just slinging the rock. Now, obviously, he's not Josh Allen
Right.
yet. Maybe one day he could get there. I don't know. But right now, first 2 starts, 20-point games, back-to-back games. Like, we've talked about this. Patrick Mahomes won 20-point game in his last 15 starts. This isn't just like a tiny little 2-week sample size for Patrick Mahomes. That's a full season. That's a full season of stats now that we have to go off Patrick Mahomes. And I still think he's the best quarterback because you can't talk
So
bad
you're
about
telling me you'd
Patrick
rather have
Mahomes.
Drake May than Patrick Mahomes? That's what you're
Hell
telling me
yeah.
right now.
And
That's
I guarantee
wild.
there's people that will trade you for that, and you get pieces. You could get a
Yeah.
piece. That's the whole thing in fantasy football when it comes to this kind of stuff, is that you could trade these guys with their name value and get good pieces on top of that.
The one thing I'll say we haven't seen with Drake May is like the bad. But the thing is, these rookies have been pretty good. Like Jaden Daniels been pretty good.
I just think
Caleb
it's a
Williams
good
have been good as of late.
quarterback class.
It's been a great quarterback class, but we have seen like times where they look elite, and we've also seen times where like we're starting, they look like
But
rookies.
Drake May hasn't even. I wouldn't say he's not even been that good. Like it's just this is the problem too. Is like it's real life and fantasy. He doesn't
Yeah,
need to be a good real life player. Anthony Richardson is dog shit. I mean, he's been dog
yeah.
shit in fantasy too. These guys don't need to be good in real life. They just
But
need
the
to be good at
touchdown, like the
fantasy.
thing is, he's been throwing like these touchdowns, like a Jermichael Hasty touchdown, and like I hear you, and but it also the opportunity will be there because they're going to be down, and he's going to
Well,
get a
and
lot
the
of garbage time shit. But
last thing I'll say is that I really do think that touchdowns are a skill for quarterbacks because we see it all the time where there's been quarterbacks, but they just don't throw touchdowns, and we're always like, if they can, it's a skill. Like it takes a lot to throw red zone touchdowns in the NFL because it's tight windows. The defenses are so good. I just think it's a skill. When you have a guy who's actually able to throw touchdowns, that that's just a massive skill that a lot of quarterbacks honestly don't possess. So if he's able to do that, I just think that's a massive, uh, just so much value. And like we already said, just the rushing upside on top of that. It's just
I hear you.
it's
I hear you
nice.
on this Drake May affair, bro. Hey, one of
It's
my
QB
guys
one.
said QB1 my ass. QB1 my all these.
What if I'll say
We're
this
starting to see it. Commodity
real
be
quick
dog. Look,
though?
I got Cedric Tillman. That's my guy.
Oh, Cedric Tillman, that's not bad. He's
That's my
interesting.
guy right there.
He's
I've been
interesting.
talking about him a little bit as like an underrated piece, and I think he's gonna have a lot of opportunity, especially if it's Jameis, not DTR, that does get the start.
What
I
if
can
they
see
do
Cedric
start
Tillman being like
DTR
wide
though?
receiver 3 rest of the way.
What if they do start DTR?
I, that would be a very Browns thing to do.
Well, I think it would be the smart thing to do.
Well, I think for fantasy, I would love it. I don't think it's gonna. I think Jameis
Well,
is the better. If you're trying to win
well for
games, you
fan.
start Jameis.
Well, I'm saying for the Browns, it would make more sense to start DTR. That way, you get the first overall pick.
Well, yeah.
Like I think that would
They
be
need a quarterback.
the Browns thing to do would be to play Jameis, who I think gives you the better chance to win games, and you don't want to win.
Nah, I mean they're not gonna win games regardless whether it's Jameis or it's DTR. It doesn't matter. But I think
Yeah.
if you play DTR, you're kind of like saying this season doesn't matter. When the only thing I think they have to figure out is obviously they have to get another player. Like Deshaun is probably gonna. They still will start Deshaun Watson next year. They will start Deshaun
They're
Watson
tied.
even off the Achilles. But you trade away Amari Cooper. You already said we're giving up on the offense, so you have to see what you have in Cedric Tillman. You got to see what you have in Jerry Judy. Otherwise, you're probably taking
And they drafted
Jamari Travis Hunter.
or whatever his name is, the wide
Travis
receiver.
Hunter.
Travis Hunter. Hey.
Yeah,
Um.
they're looking at Travis Hunter.
One last thing I want to say real quick
Yeah.
about Drake May. So 2 20-point games. What if he finished the season from the time he started to the end of the season in point per game basis as a top 12 wide receiver or quarterback? Where would you draft him next year? I think he'd be a great. I think he'll be a great value
with him. I would draft him. I still would probably take him like that 7 to 10 range.
And I think that's where he'll go. And he'll probably. I already see it in my head.
No, he'll go lower than that.
He'll be a fantastic value. And I can already see it. It's like Jaden Daniels. We were on Jaden Daniels.
Yep.
It was easy to see the massive upside that he possesses. And I think as long as Drake May continues to look good, like we can see it next year where, man, it's just and this is the year I've learned it. My God, I'm not drafting a quarterback and a tight end early again. A fucking mistake.
See, Tyler, you coming around to the show, bro. Come join the party,
and especially
man.
with Jaden Daniels, he was so easy to see. It was so easy, and you knew it. And I have a ton of them. And I still drafted a quarterback early, and I just was like, God, I'm not going to let somebody else get this guy. I got to take him. So next year, I just know. I know.
I've always talked about this strategy-wise. I've always talked about like waiting on quarterback and waiting on tight end. And I think there's been this misconception for whatever reason in the fantasy community that you have to have a pillar quarterback and take one early. The teams that have the quarterbacks that put up over 20 fantasy points, they end up winning the leagues, right? But the problem is everybody thinks you have to draft them. You just have to find them.
Find them, yeah.
Yes, and we're talking about, and it doesn't have to be the guys that were that all season long. It just needs to be at the fantasy playoffs. You have a guy that's capable of scoring 20 points. We're seeing that with Geno Smith. We're seeing that with Drake May. We're seeing that with Jaden Daniels. There's Baker Mayfield is that type. Like,
yeah.
You don't have to take a quarterback early unless you know you're getting like good value on him. There's no need to reach on that. And in tight end, They're all the same. If it's the Travis Kelce effect for whatever reason for years has made us think we have to go get a tight end. Tight ends
Wow.
didn't used to go till like the third round.
I think if the season continues like it is, my God, the tight ends are going to fall. There's no way they're going to go early again. There's no way. Like
we're talking like 5th, 6th round for the first quarterback tight end off the board next year.
Probably, and a lot of guys probably even later. I just don't think it's going to be. It's probably going to be Brock Bowers will be high up there, but outside of him, it'll be a lot of guys that will just completely.
If it ain't Bowers or Trey McBride, Kittle, those are going to be the top guys. Like, and we're seeing the teams that drafted tight ends early. Kyle Pitts, Kincaid, it just doesn't work out. Like, there's very few Travis Kelce's in the league.
Kelce's been awful this year. He's been so bad.
I meant the pass effect. Like, we're getting a 1300-yard tight end. Like, we're not getting. There's no
we're not
tight end
in
the league right now that's probably going to even maybe barely clear 1,000 yards.
I don't even know if they're projected. I mean, it's got to be. I don't know. It's been awful to say the least. It's been so bad
in receiving yardage for tight ends.
At the tight end.
Yeah,
here, I'll look it up right now.
Yeah,
it's. I would say it's probably. I don't even know.
What, Brock
to be honest,
up there?
Brock is probably the one. If I had to take a guess, it'd probably be Brock. But Brock Bowers at 400. Oh my God, he's 100 yards over George Kittle. Wow. Yeah, he'll definitely be tight end 1 next year.
Wow.
He's at 400. He's already at 500, nearly 500 receiving yards. He'll crack.
And then he's got rid of Devontae Adams too.
Yeah, like he'll be tight end 1 next year. But yeah,
probably like a 3rd round, 4th round guy for him.
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
Outside of that,
about quarterback and tight end, it's weird because those, for whatever reason in our heads, it's like it's good to have an elite tight end. It's good to have like good quarterback play, but I think the quarterback specifically, like even in super flex leagues, for whatever reason, they tell you and the stats say to draft a quarterback early. I think it's more valuable to have those heavy position players, running back and wide receiver, because they're the receiver position especially. It's so hard to replicate elite receivers.
The receiver position is definitely, like, going back and looking at it, just loading up on, and this was kind of the thing that I've done for years now, past couple of years, just loading up on the receiver position early in the draft. It's just the smartest thing to do. You're going to have some of your duds, but you're just going to, especially in the first round, like you look at those guys, the first round wide receivers this year. Yeah, CeeDee Lamb, and I get that Tyreek, it has been great, but it's not his fault. Like, it's not like he's playing bad. It's just literally Tua. But then you get Jamar Chase, you get Jay Jettis, you get AJ Brown, you get Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like, these guys are just going to finish as top 5 guys. So it's just,
it's, tried and true strategy, man. Over time you start, it's the thing is though, we get the new QBs, we get everybody we love, the players are like, ooh, I got to get these players. So it's tough sometimes to take the old faithfuls.
Absolutely.
All right, that does it for this episode. Me and Tyler will be back, obviously, a lot more throughout the week. We're going to try to get you guys a couple extra episodes in throughout this next month. And know this is a very tough time in fantasy. We got to stack up these wins, my man. Any parting thoughts?
No, just keep grinding. This one league, my favorite league, I'm about to be 2-5. It's my worst league so far this year. But
that's your money league?
What?
Is that your money league too?
Yeah, it's my money league. Tyreek's killed me. But I have a good team, so you just got to keep grinding. Yeah, things will change. I
ain't doing too bad, Tyler. I got a lot of 3-3 teams that are either 4-3 or 3-4. I got a 5. My money league team is gonna be 6-1. I got one of those 1-point wins when Najee got in the end zone. Not my boy Najee. He got in the end zone, took me to that lead, baby. So, all right, we'll see you on the next one. Peace out.
Peace.